Do you keep small scraps of cardstock? Today I'm using mine to create mini scene tags. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel on the first and third Saturday of the month. So if you enjoy my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. I'm using some of the new Crafty Necessities cardstock. This is 8.5 by 11 inch sized cardstock, and they come in packs of 10. For the time being, I'm keeping all of my little scraps in the original packaging. Once I move this cardstock to its permanent home, I am going to keep all of my little scraps in pockets. So I'm using some of the colours from the August release and then also two from the September release as well. So I'm starting off with the Caribbean sky, and I'm going to cut 2 tags from the Terrific Tags die set using this cardstock. So I'm placing one of the middle sized tags onto the piece of cardstock, holding it down with some low tack tape, and then I can run that through my die cutting machine. I'm then going to add some ink blending on top. So I'm starting off with Persian Blue Fresh Dye ink. This is from the Glacier Caves collection, and I'm using a small blending brush and adding that ink towards the top of the tag. This is going to create a sky for me. What I love about using coloured cardstock is that you can use that colour of the cardstock as your lightest shade of ink, so you don't have to do so much ink blending on top. So I'm fading this colour out kind of towards the bottom. So like I said, I've got that colour of the cardstock towards the bottom and having it darker towards the top. So just making sure there that I've got enough saturation of the colour. This cardstock does blend really nicely with inks on top. It does tend to start a little bit splotchy, but as it dries, it does dry really nice and smooth. I can then go in with ultraviolet fresh dye ink, and although this is a purple, it's not necessarily going to read as purple on the tag. It's just going to kind of darken that blue up a little bit and make it maybe look a little bit more like an indigo. I think it's a really pretty way to darken up sky in particular. I did accidentally get a little bit of ink there at the bottom, but that's going to get covered up, so I didn't need to worry too much about that. I'm just going to do the exact same thing for the second tag because I'm going to create 2 tags today. So again, I can go in with that Persian blue at the top. I'm using a lighter hand sort of as I go down the tag to lighten up that ink blending towards the bottom. Then just making sure that I've got really nice saturation of colour, and then I can bring in that ultraviolet to really darken up the top of that sky. And then I thought I'd finished at this point, so I've brought in my other tag, and I think the other tag is a little bit darker at the top. And although they don't have to match at all, I quite liked having the top of the sky be really nice and dark. So just adding a little bit extra ink onto the top of that. I then want to add some snow to my sky. So I'm taking the titanium white artist gouache. Before I place that down onto my non-stick craft sheet, I'm just going to spray a little bit of water on. I like to add the water first onto the sheet rather than the paint, just so that I don't accidentally spritz any of the paint around onto my mat. So I've just added a little bit of that onto my craft sheet. I can pick up some of the water with the brush and then mix that with the gouache. And I like to have this fairly thick. I don't want to add too much water to it. I find that not only does it work better being thicker in terms of dots for snow in particular, but also it dries a lot quicker without so much water in it. So I try not to add too much water. So I've got the paint on the brush there. I can tap the brush and that's going to splatter that onto the background and leave lots of lovely dots of snow. I don't want to create a blizzard here, but I do definitely want to add enough so that it looks intentional, that I didn't just accidentally add some splatter onto the background. So I can set those aside to dry while I work on my focal point. So this is the Winter Village die set that I'm going to use for my scenes today. I absolutely love it. It's really great because you can create lots of different scenes. It is made to be in the shape of a circle, but I'm using it on the rectangular tag today and it still works really nicely. So I'm taking this piece here that creates kind of like the sky or the snow, depending on whether you use it as a positive or a negative. And like I say, it is in the shape of a circle, but I'm literally just going to cut the bottom part of this tag because I only need the bottom part for kind of a layer of snow to go on the bottom of my tags. So I've run that through my die cutting machine. I cut it on the tag just so that it was the same shape and it was easier for me to just add on to my base layer. I'm then bringing in the other dies from the set. So I've got the houses, the roof, the doors, and then there is also a moon and stars in this set, which is really nice, but I'm not using it on my cards today just because I wanted that snowy background. So here I can bring in all my scraps of cardstock. I'm using the Coral Bliss cardstock for the roof and also the door of one of the houses. So I can hold the dies down with some low tack tape. I can then bring in parrot cardstock for the trees. And I am also going to cut the trees from forest fern as well. So I've got 2 shades of green for the trees. And then I remembered at this point I need to cut the doors. So I'm using the Coral Bliss for that as well. And then I've got the blush cardstock for the house. So I've run those through my die cutting machine. I only need one of these pink houses for my tags today. So I'm going to save the other one for another card. I can just remove that low tack tape that I used to hold them in place and then pop out all of those dies. And again, I only need one door in the pink colour or the coral colour and one roof. And then I'm going to cut them again from Lagoon cardstock for the roof and the doors of the second house. And then Volcano Lake for the house itself. So again, I can just run those through my die cutting machine. And now I can put all of the houses together. They are tiny, so I'm using some tweezers here and some liquid glue to place the roof there on the top of the house. And what I will say is, it is a little bit fiddly in real life, but I tend to find that it's even more fiddlier when I'm filming. So where you're kind of seeing this, I think I'm making it look a little bit worse than it actually is in real life. I didn't have a problem when I did it the first time, but I'm trying not to get my head in the way of the camera, so I'm kind of doing it from a distance, so that's why it looks a little bit like I'm being a little bit more fiddly than I ordinarily would be. So I've got the door there that I've placed on top, and now I can do the same thing for the other house. So I've got the coral roof, and I like using liquid glue here just so that I've got time to sort of wiggle the pieces in place. So I can pop that down, and then I can do the same thing for the other door there. And I thought it'd be fun to do the houses in kind of bright colours. I think it would be really nice to do like a load of different houses in lots of different colours. You could do loads of different colour combinations as well. Because the windows are completely cut out, I wanted there to be something behind them, and I thought a good way to do that would be to add some vellum. So I'm just cutting down small pieces of vellum here, adding some liquid glue onto the back of the house, and then I can pop that vellum down. I could do like a die cut inlay technique where I added maybe white cardstock or maybe yellow to look like lights kind of coming through the windows, but I thought it would be quite nice to add the vellum. You can kind of still see through them, but it is kind of covered a little bit. You could definitely do 2 layers of the vellum as well if you wanted them to be a little bit more opaque. So just adding that glue on the back there, and then I can pop that piece of vellum down. And then I completely forgot that I wanted to have that kind of, I call it a hole reinforcer. I know some people call it an eyelet, from the Labels and Two Tags die set. And I'd cut them from that Caribbean Sky cardstock. And I'd meant to adhere them down onto the tags before I did the ink blending, but completely forgot. So I'm going to try and see if I can get them to match the colour of the cardstock now that I've added the ink blending on top. So I'm just bringing in the blending tools, and they've still got a little bit of ink on, so I'm just going over those pieces there. They're not going to be as dark, and they're not going to blend in as much as I'd hoped that they were going to, but I still like to just kind of finish off the top of the tag with those. I do think that it kind of finishes it off nicely and looks a little bit neater, although I still like the tags without them as well, but I just quite liked to have them for this particular design. I then cut the tag another 2 times from Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock, and I'm just adding some glue tape onto the back of the white tag, and then I can pop the one that I've added the ink blending on top of that tag, so they're kind of sandwiched together back to back. This is so that not only does it look really nice on the back if I want to write a personal message, but it does also add a little bit of stability onto the tag as well. Because this cardstock is on the thinner side, it's £80 or £90 cardstock depending on the colour, I do like to kind of reinforce it with slightly thicker cardstock, and that will help when it comes to tying my bows as well, so I'll talk a little bit about that later. So I've added another one of those eyelets onto the back, again just to make it look quite neat from the back as well as the front. I've now got my snow pieces that I've added a little bit of glue tape onto the bottom of. I don't want to add the glue tape all the way to the top because I know that I want to pop some of the trees in behind the snow, so I don't want there to be glue there, so I'm just mainly focusing that glue towards the bottom, and then I can just pop that down towards the bottom of the tag. And then I do tend to just kind of go around the outside edges with my nail just to try and remove any of those little bits of cardstock that kind of hang around after die cutting. I've then laid out my scenes here. I did this off camera just because it did take me a little while, I have to admit, and so I can now pop everything in place. So I'm adding some liquid glue onto the back of this tiny little tree here, and then I can pop that down behind the snow. And then I can go in and adhere the other trees as well. So I'm starting off with the trees, adding them with some liquid glue, and like I say, popping some of them behind that snow as well. And then before I add the other tree, I do want to add the house, and I'm going to add the house with some instant dimension foam tape. So I'm just cutting small tiny pieces here of that foam tape, just to go around the edges of the house, but obviously I don't want to cover up where the windows are because you would see that adhesive through the vellum. So I can pop that down, and then I realised that I could have done with a little bit of extra foam tape behind the top of the house, and I do go back and add that later. So here I can just add a little bit of foam tape onto the back of this tree, remove the backing, and then I can pop that down in front. And then I'm just going to do the exact same thing for the other tag. So I can pop that tree there behind the snow. And then I'm kind of just sort of figuring it out as I go along. Although I did place the kind of die cuts there already, I did kind of change my mind as I was going for some of it. So just popping that little tree there behind the snow. And I like having the combination of the 2 greens for the trees. I do think it works quite nicely. I can then add some more foam tape onto the back of this house. Trying to cut the foam tape as small as possible. And I can just remove the backings off of that foam tape. I like to use tweezers just to help me out there. So I can pop that down, and then this is where I realised that I needed a little bit of extra foam tape behind the top of the houses. So I'm just adding it here, and then like I say, I do go back to the aqua house and add a little bit behind there as well. just to make sure that everything is even. And then I can finish off with this tree here on the left hand side, just kind of popping it behind the house. I think originally I had it sort of in front of the house, but I think it looks a bit nicer just behind it. So that's my little scenes created. I'm now going to stamp my sentiments. So I'm using the Pocket Sentiments stamp set. I'm taking the sentiment that says Happy Holidays, and I can place that down in the stamp wheel on top of my white cardstock. This is £110 Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. I can bring in the top flip plate of the stamp wheel to pick up that stamp. I can then ink up the stamp using Obsidian pigment ink. So just inking up that sentiment really well, I can flip over that plate and stamp that down. And I did get a pretty good impression first time, but if you know me, you know that I tend to double stamp, especially sentiments. So I'm just going to ink that up again and then stamp that down. I did just set that aside to dry for a little while. And then I can bring in the coordinating die from the Pocket Sentiments die set. And you can see here that the die cuts really closely to the word. And I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to get it in the right place. So I've cut it from some white cardstock. And I'm going to use this as a template to be able to place my die on top, and it's going to be in the right place. So I've placed that template over the top, making sure that it's kind of level so that all around the sentiment there is the same kind of amount of cardstock showing. I can then bring in the die and it's just going to pop in like a puzzle piece. It's not going to move, but I am going to hold it down with some low tack tape. I can run that through my die cutting machine and then I can pop that out, and now I've got my sentiment all nicely kind of cut out with the same, about the same amount of kind of excess cardstock all around the outside. So that's a really good trick if you're not sure where a die is going to cut. I can then use that piece that I cut from the template and adhere that behind the sentiment, and that's just going to give me a little bit of dimension to that sentiment so that I'm not going to stick it on completely flat. So I can add some more liquid glue onto the back of that, and then I can pop that down onto the tag. And I did the same sentiment for both of the tags. I thought it worked quite nicely, although it is quite large in comparison to the size of the houses and the trees. I do think it still works nicely in comparison with the whole tag. So I can just add a little bit more glue onto the back of the second sentiment, and then I can pop that down onto the other tag. Just wiggle them in place and let that glue dry. And now I can add some twine onto the tags. And you can see there that as I push that twine through, I do like to secure it nice and tightly. And that's where having that double layer of the cardstock really helps, because I feel like it would bend the cardstock otherwise if it wasn't kind of robust enough. So I can just tie that twine in a bow, and then I can bring in my scissors and cut those tails down. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing for the other tag. And then to finish off, I wanted there to be some snow on the trees and the houses, but I didn't want to add the splatter onto it because I didn't want to have loads on them so that they're kind of covered, but I still wanted it to look like they're in amongst the snow and not just kind of in front of the snow. So I'm using a white gel pen here just to add some dots onto the trees to start with. Just adding a few onto each of the trees, or in this case one just on that little tree there, and then I can just add a few onto the houses as well. And that's the tags finished for today. I really love those cute little scenes on the bottoms of those tags. And like I say, I think this die set works really well for lots of different shapes, not just the circle that's in the die set. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.